Hello and welcome to Rates and Ravings. I'm John from Room 100 and these are my reviews for March of 2021. Buckle in, it's gonna be a long one. I'm going to start off with the thing that everybody's talking about right now, WandaVision. Marvel's first foray into their Disney Plus shows. It stars Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda and Paul Bettany as Vision, returning to those roles. We have the new character of Agatha Harkness, played by Kathryn Hahn, as well as some returning side characters like Jimmy Woo from Ant-Man, Darcy Lewis from Thor, and a grown-up Monica Rambeau from Captain Marvel. To give a super brief overview, Vision is dead from the events of Infinity War, and Wanda has created a little pocket reality for herself where she can live out a normal sitcom life with a recreated Vision. So I really enjoyed the show and was happy with how it turned out on the whole, despite kind of having a weak ending to me, but it turned out that this show was pretty divisive both in the beginning and end of its run. I'm going to take it episode by episode and kind of track those feelings of the audience as well as my personal feelings, talk about how the show built things up and how they either succeeded or failed at paying those off, and then after that I'll go into more specific kind of moments and character things. So episodes 1 and 2 were played pretty straight, not revealing too much, and I really enjoyed it, but this was the first moment where a lot of people seemed to be kind of split on it, and a lot of people didn't really like what was going on. Some of the reactions were a little hilarious to me. Like, obviously we all knew that this was going to fall apart and there's going to be a reality that kind of had to come to the forefront of the show at some point, but people just did not want to spend any time in the sitcom reality for some reason. Well, I loved it. The first couple episodes were what I was really looking for, which is, you know, the really great production to copy some of those old shows, and then the really off-putting tone implemented by some of the situations and the kind of horror angle that a couple moments take. I really enjoyed those moments. I was really excited to be following along with the subtle clues and not too anxious for the veneer to drop. Some people went a little too far in the other direction, saying that they would watch a show with these two characters just doing normal sitcom things but also dealing with being superheroes, and I didn't really feel that way. The first 2 episodes are really entertaining, but obviously they are made to still pay off some kind of big reveal at some point. You can only get away with the super stereotypical sitcom thing for so long. The first 2 episodes felt fairly similar to me, so I was happy they released them up front, and they do feel really short with the 7 minutes of credits, which always came way too soon. God, there's so much credits. But yeah, I don't have a lot to say about the first 2 episodes other than I really enjoyed them, and I didn't feel like it was a slow start at all. I felt like it was perfect. I really liked the commercials, the use of color to contrast the black and white, and some of the pointed dialogue that gets paid off in the future, especially on a rewatch. Some of the Agatha or Agnes stuff, it's definitely a lot more focused and you can tell what's going on. Great start, and people got to chill and learn how to enjoy a show, I guess. Episodes 3 and 4 were also really strong, but I would say primarily episodes 1 through 3 were, I think, my favorite moments of the whole show. To focus on episode 3, we're in color now, but it still feels like a super straightforward sitcom. There's only, you know, a couple moments and then the very end of that episode that start to pull us back to reality. And I still think that, you know, all the things that I praised in episode 1 or 2, the dedication to the sitcom style of that time frame was really great. Also, the edit moment in episode 3 where Wanda rewinds Vision, but it's just like a really subtle little cut and blip back in time, that was great. The first time I watched it, I loved that moment. Then in episode 4, we fully go back to reality. We get introduced to Monica, who I think is a really cool character and plays really well in a lot of these situations. It does hurt a little bit every time we have to go back to the normal Marvel reality, if for no other reason than we have this great sitcom production and really fun lighting and colors, and then we go back to the super blue desaturated look of a lot of Marvel. Even so, episode 4 was one of the more fun moments of exposition to kind of pull back the curtain on the whole thing. And like I said, Monica is a really good character. I in general really liked all the side characters in the show. It feels like they all got taken out of their really mediocre original movies and given some time to actually shine and be expressive and fun characters. So episodes 1 to 3 probably the strongest point in the show for me, and then episode 4 a little disappointing to have to go back to reality, but still a really solid episode that helps to establish a little bit of what's going on without giving the whole thing away. Episodes 5 and 6 were still really good, but you really start to feel how much the reality side of things and the credits start to cut into the runtime of the sitcom world. I really wish those episodes were longer so we could get more in the style. Episode 5 is still pretty consistently in the whole 80s sitcom, but especially the 90s and 2000s episodes, I felt like there was just no time to really live in the setting. Lots of really interesting things start happening here though, including the children starting to grow up really quickly, and Pietro, which will be a whole other thing that I'll talk about shortly. But in general, that blend of subtlety versus revealing what's going on started to feel a little bit weaker at this point in the show, even though there's still some really solid moments. Most of those moments come from Vision, honestly. This is where Paul Bettany just starts popping off and giving some amazing performances, and just there's some great lines and really emotional moments that just so much bring you into where Vision is at right now, trying to figure everything out. He has some great moments with his argument with Wanda, his kind of snarky remarks in the 90s episode saying like, well, this is the only thing that you'll let me wear with this costume. Moments where he gets to play off of other things in the world, like bringing Norm back to reality. Norm's acting switch was really great as well, and then seeing the fringe people at the end of town was really effective. And then when he breaks out and the first thing that he says is the people need help, and he's still not thinking about himself. I love it. Paul Bettany as Vision is amazing in this. Then we get to episodes 7 and 8, which is probably the weakest part of the whole show for me. With episode 7, it feels like there's just absolutely no time to get the 2000 style of sitcom in there. There's so much stuff going on in the outside world and all around the different places, and everything's really starting to come together for the big reveal. And it just isn't as impactful and impressive as those full-blown sitcom episodes at the earlier part of the series. Episode 7 is probably the single weakest episode for me in the whole show, even though Agatha all along does slap hard. And with episode 8, I do appreciate finally giving Wanda her real origin story and kind of diving into her life and getting to see those moments. It does make her feel like a more fully realized character than she has for most of the MCU, but it does feel very sudden. All of episode 8 is like, boom, exposition. I will say though, I do like the kind of mysteriousness and not really going too into detail of how this version of magic works, but it is still pretty interesting to see how different groups of people use magic. Like the difference between how Wanda and Agatha use magic versus Doctor Strange. I do think that is kind of cool without getting too specific and like needing to explain every part of it like a lot of this universe does. But yeah, episodes 7 and 8 were where I started to get a little bit worried for the direction of the show, mainly because it lost the full-on sitcom thing with the really subtle and off-putting moments that I enjoyed so much in the earlier episodes. Though I will quickly mention Monica's turning into a superhero scene in episode 7. I do think that was really visually cool and interesting. That was a really fun way to do it, and we haven't really gotten that kind of full-on superhero origin in a while, so I did enjoy that. And then episode 9 with the finale of the show, I did think it was a pretty good episode and a pretty decent conclusion to the whole series, though there was a lot of stuff that didn't really come to fruition that I would have liked to see, but that's mostly my fault. There are still some really clever confrontations here. Like there's some of the more generic Marvel two people with the same powers throwing punches kind of stuff going on, but there's a couple moments of Agatha and Wanda trying to out magic each other, and then the Vision conversation with the White Vision, the whole ship of Theseus thing. I really enjoyed that. Vision just gets so many good moments, and I love that humanized robot versus pure robot discussion. That was great. It sets up a lot of interesting things for the future, like the post-credits scene with the Darkhold. The full-on Scarlet Witch costume looks great. I'm so excited that she gets to actually look really cool now. Agatha does lose her personality a little bit, I think, at the end of the series. Like episode 8, she does really lean into kind of like a more like mad scientist trying to figure out kind of character, which is, you know, amazing in Spider-Verse, but not exactly what I was looking for here. And then she kind of just loses the more fun side of things in episode 9. She's just full on like, I want your power, give me your power. She loses a little bit of quirkiness in that switch. Regardless, there's some really good emotional moments, and I overall did enjoy what it did for the series. And to wrap things up, the post-credit scenes are interesting. The only thing that really annoyed me, besides some of the bigger stuff that I'll talk about in a second, was why doesn't Vision mention White Vision? Like, I understand, like, now he's out there for some future movie or show or whatever. Like, he'll show up again, obviously, because he more or less is the real Vision now, and he has all of those memories up until the point of his death. He just doesn't have the whole living in the sitcom world part, which is honestly fine, because that was probably pretty traumatizing. Not as traumatizing as dying to Thanos, but still. But yeah, like, fake Vision is about to be erased from existence and leave Wanda alone again. And then he gives, there's again some really great emotional moments where he's like talking about what he used to be. He used to be a voice without a body but not human. And then he's just kind of like, who knows what I'll be next. So after watching it episodically, I did go through and watch the entire series back to back, and I did really enjoy it. I would say that it did lift up some of the weaker episodes to me, to see it all played out side by side. There's a couple things that I don't really feel were given the full explanation that they deserved with how much emphasis was put on them. Like the whole, why is it a hex thing? All of the hexes, why is it hex? And it's just like, I guess they were hexes because the Scarlet Witch uses hex magic or something. Like, it wasn't really explained, and it's like, we know Wanda's the Scarlet Witch, like, even though she wasn't called that. And then the whole missing persons thing didn't really get resolved. A lot of people are saying maybe that was Ralph Bohner. God, it sounds so stupid to say. Lots of people are saying that maybe Ralph is the missing person, which I think is a decent enough explanation, but they definitely could have made it clearer in the show. Even on rewatch, I felt the conclusion was a little weak, especially some of the CG is not very good looking, but the emotional moments hold everything up. And I think the thing that was the most bettered by the rewatch was the feel of the villains in this show. Originally, there was all these thoughts about like some big bad, but the way that Agatha and Hayward work in the show, when you watch everything back to back, is pretty concise, especially Hayward. Like, he's a little bit boring and generic, but his whole motivations and arc do make sense. I never thought that he was like some big evil magical villain in disguise. So he felt pretty good on rewatch. Agatha, there's still a couple problems, but you do understand where she's coming from when you know the context of everything and how it's going to turn out. And it still does leave some things open for the future with Darkhold and all of that. So to go into characters and some other stuff, Agatha was a really fun villain and a great side character. Kathryn Hahn was amazing. She's been killing it recently. I do kind of like that her plans weren't fully laid out in the end. Like, her intentions were, but not really her step by step. Like, it's really apparent on rewatch in episode 1. She's trying to feel Wanda out, see what's going on. She's definitely trying to get a hold of who else is in this house. Like, she mentions Wanda being single at first, and then she realizes that Vision is somehow in this house. And then she's trying to figure out, did she resurrect Vision? So she kills Sparky to see if she'll do it to Sparky. And then she's like, no, okay, so how did she make Vision? And she kind of pushes her to make kids, which she does. She then gets Vision away from Wanda so that Wanda becomes depressed enough to give her the kids, and then uses the kids as leverage to get the full picture of Wanda's abilities. It's clear enough in retrospect, but I did appreciate for the most part that they didn't spell it out plain as day in the show. I'm not sure if it's a good or a bad thing that we didn't see her working for some higher power. I'll talk about that more when I talk about expectations and theories versus the reality of the show, but like, there's just kind of some questions that are still there, like what was she doing that got her persecuted in Salem? And there's like all the couple little hints and mentions to devil and stuff like that, and it's just such a classic witch thing that it felt like that would be more of an interesting angle than just like, she's power hungry. I do think she's a pretty decent villain with pretty understandable motivations, but I don't think she really plays off of Wanda in terms of the themes of the show. I guess you could say something about her being greedy and like showing Wanda the darker side of what she could be doing, but overall she doesn't really play into the whole grief angle very well. And like, despite the song going hard, I do think it's a little bit of an exaggeration to say it was Agatha all along. Like, she just kind of showed up. She was trying to figure out what Wanda could do, why she was so powerful, things like that. But I was really thinking earlier on that she would have encouraged Wanda to create this reality. She always seemed a little more in on it than some of the other side characters of the show, which is obviously because she was never under control. But it felt like she was encouraging Wanda in some ways, like in the 80s episode, saying like, do you want me to take that again? And then all the pushing Wanda for the children, it felt really intentional and pointed, like she wanted Wanda to make these children for some reason, and you know, make the reality to make the children go through that whole rabbit hole. But again, she just kind of like I guess, senses the witch magic and shows up. So it's, you know, despite the song being so good, I don't think it's really accurate to how Agatha was important to the show. I think we'll be seeing Agatha again, especially with how well received Katherine Hahn was in this role. The final thing I'll say about her is that it is cold as hell that Wanda just like leaves her brainwashed in this little town without her magic. That felt kind of brutal to me. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, being Evan Peters as Pietro. This was by far the biggest disappointment and letdown of the series for me and for nearly everybody else who has watched the show. So I will say that if this came out like 15 years ago, I could see this being the kind of cameo that'd be like, oh, see, it's fun because he used to play a different version of this character and now he's, you know, doing it in this sitcom reality. It's just like a fun little cameo, like Lou Ferrigno showing up in a Hulk movie. But there's just so much surrounding context and so much emphasis was put on this big reveal in episode 5 that you just can't have that same kind of reaction. Like, fans know about all this multiverse stuff that is being set up. Fans know that Marvel has bought Fox, so now they have the rights to those X-Men characters. It was absolutely inevitable that having him in this role would cause people to speculate wildly and have their expectations go through the roof for something that would pay off so little as naming him Ralph Boner, which I think, in retrospect, is kind of amazing. Like, that is a big brain play for Marvel to do, but still, on the whole, like, the way that everything was set up, I think even regardless of fan theories and, you know, what might happen, are they going to introduce mutants, etc., etc., it's the way that the show presented him playing Pietro was such a big deal. And it was like, you're not the same Pietro, but you are Pietro, you have the super speed. And there's just so much that felt like it was going to be really cool, and then they didn't do anything with it. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed seeing him again. He's always been my favorite Quicksilver. I think he did a great job, even if he kind of reminded me of Adam Scott in The Good Place. And I do think that even with fan theories and stuff like that, I think expecting mutants to show up so soon in the MCU is definitely misplaced. Like, they're barely setting up the Fantastic Four. We have a ways to go before we get mutants. So, and you know, this is Wanda and Vision's show. It's not really the place to do that. It's the, you know, this isn't Age of Ultron trying to set up 50 different things at the same time. With that in mind, it still feels misguided. It feels like there had to have been some other way that they could have done this. But going back to the focal points of the series, let's talk about Vision. He was a great emotional center point to play off of Wanda, an amazing character. Both actors did really well here, but my personal favorite was Paul Bettany. I feel like he brought the fire to the show. It's so nice to see these characters and actors who got basically nothing to work with in their past movies, because they're always in some kind of team-up movie. But now they had their time to shine and really bring some depth to these characters. It was so great to watch. He has so many good moments, like the pre-Civil War flashback, escaping Westview, arguing with Wanda, talking to the White Vision. There's just so many great moments.
Before what? I can't remember my life before Westview. I don't know who I am. I'm scared. Wonder why are there no other children in Westview?
Oh, there are. Just stop it.
Oh no. The playground stands empty every morning I walk to work. Why? Tell me why.
Again, still a little confused why he didn't bring up White Vision. I really thought it was going to end with him inhabiting White Vision to combine those two pieces of him back together. I understand why they didn't thematically, to let Wanda process the grief and, you know, set up future movies and shows, whatever, but it still feels a little weird that he didn't do that. And finally, there's Wanda. Elizabeth Olsen also brings some great performance moments to the show. A really good portrayal of this character just being so alone and isolating herself and not understanding her powers, not understanding why her life is so terrible. There's tons of great little acting shifts going from the sitcom to reality, and I'm so excited that she gets to be the full-on Scarlet Witch now. I just hope they don't nerf her. Like, they said she's more powerful than the Sorcerer Supreme, and in past movies I already felt like her and Vision were a little bit nerfed, but at least in the past she didn't realize how powerful she was, so if they do it now, it's gonna be a little weak. Oh, but major gripe, if you're gonna bring up the whole accent thing, then actually work to fix it. Like, they make a joke out of the fact that her accent is super inconsistent and bad.
What happened to your accent?
What happened to yours?
Where are my children? Oof. That accent really comes and goes, doesn't it?
And I don't know if it's Elizabeth Olsen's fault or the fact that just no one is directing her to be a little more consistent. It obviously made sense when she was trying to live in the American sitcom versus reality, but even when she's in reality, the accent still comes and goes. So don't make a joke out of it unless you're going to fix it. The final thing I really want to go into with this show is theories and expectations versus reality, which is where a lot of people were struggling with their feelings on this show. With a lot of the tone and the subtle hints and some of the off things happening throughout the sitcom reality, my gold standard expectation here was something like Westworld Season 1. What I really loved about that was there were fan theories and people were guessing a bunch of different stuff, and it felt like those paid off. Like, not everything was correct, but the hints that were being placed, even subtly or a little more in your face, felt very intentional, and it felt like they paid off, whether it was in the way that people expected or in a different way that people didn't fully call. But either way, it felt like there was a payoff. And that's where I feel like WandaVision failed for a lot of people, and me in a couple of places. There was so much emphasis put on like a lot of really minute details that people were calling out and was even getting called out in the show, like the hex and the missing person, things like that. Those were kind of weaker points that they didn't really pay off, but they did pay off stuff with the commercials. I felt like those were really well done, especially the toaster one being the bomb. Like, I called that out once I saw it, but it was still a great way to bring that in, and then they pull that back in when they're going through Wanda's life and start to explain like, you've had magic all along. Like, that was really well done, but other things not so much. So there's kind of a sliding scale for me in terms of these setups of things that are fine that they didn't happen because it was just fan theories versus you really fumbled this. How did you mess this up? Again, the biggest polar side of that is with Quicksilver and the X-Men, especially bringing in concepts like Nexus with the Depression commercial, Nexus being a reference to the fact that Scarlet Witch is a Nexus being in all realities, and that ties into House of M killing all the mutants. Again, she's super attached to the whole mutant X-Men angle. So the whole Quicksilver thing, definitely the biggest lack of payoff despite a bunch of setup. Then more towards the middle, there's the whole aerospace friend thing. A lot of people were losing their mind over this, thinking, is it Reed Richards? Are we starting to get the Fantastic Four here? Like, does Wanda calls the Fantastic Four? I think it's fine that it wasn't Reed Richards or anyone important. Like, again, this show doesn't have to set up other stuff, so I'm fine from that side of things. But even on my rewatch, there was a lot of emphasis put on it. Like, she mentions that she has this friend, and then she like stares at her phone for 10 seconds, and she brings it up for like every episode until we finally meet the person. And I just don't know why so much emphasis was put on it. Like, it's not a big reveal or anything. It's just like the setup to how she gets her powers. So I don't know if they kept bringing it up to explain why she's leaving the camp and like why she gets away from the hex and all that stuff. Maybe it was just to remind people that she's gonna leave and go do that, but it was really odd, even though it was fine that it wasn't some big payoff. And then on the other side of it's fine that it didn't mean anything, there's a lot of references to devil stuff, and a lot of people were drawing the lines to Mephisto being some big bad, and I think that would have been interesting. I do think there's a pretty big chance that he still appears at some point. Maybe he bargains with Wanda for the souls of her children or something like that with the Darkhold, or like possesses her or some wild stuff in Doctor Strange 2. But a lot of people thought that he was going to show up now with the devil's in the details, Pietro calling the kids demon spawn, the cicada and Senior Scratchy, which are all very heavily devil related. A lot of people thought that that was going to pay off more immediately. If it does pay off in general, then I'm not sure if that's going to be better or worse for the show, because there was all these hints that didn't mean anything until later. So I don't know if it's going to be better or worse that they never meant anything or they mean something like a year from now. Regardless, like I said earlier, the villains do have clearly enough stated motives on rewatch that it doesn't bother me that there's not some big bad. It does still feel a little bit like they planted these clues in these very specific lines to not have it pay off in some way. So other than all that, I thought the acting was extremely solid. I thought the production was great, especially the older episodes episodes with touches like being filmed in front of a live audience, using just all the little stuff on strings and the really basic visual effects. This whole show was way more exciting to me on a week-to-week basis than Mando was, and I am pretty bummed that the next thing we're getting is Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Feels like we're just shooting right back into the really generic Marvel action stuff. And the show had a really solid message and narrative too about grief and trauma and processing that, and also more importantly not putting that onto other people and not expecting forgiveness despite doing terrible things, even if you have had terrible things happen to you. There's a lot of interesting ways that WandaVision kind of touches on that with Wanda herself, and I thought it was all really good.
Hey, so I actually had a lot more thoughts on this than I thought I did, but I had no time to get back in front of the green screen, so I'm recording this at work real quick. So yeah, all the themes of grief and moving on and not putting it onto other people are all in WandaVision, but I thought the other major theme was like TV reality versus actual reality, which is made clear that, you know, as it moves throughout time, just like TV shows have grown over time, it starts to get more real, more personal, and more of the outside world starts to creep in. But it's also this kind of thing of Wanda thinking that if she makes it like this, like those old TV shows, it'll be perfect immediately, when any TV show throughout time, that's just not real. That's not a possible thing. She also has obvious parallels to Hayward. They both want to bring Vision back for basically their own means, even if she has a lot better intentions with it. They both kind of go against Vision's will, and I think they have a lot more parallels, even than maybe Wanda and Agatha have, despite their similar background and powers. So I think that's another interesting thing. And I also thought there was a little bit more subtext to Monica's hero transformation scene than I thought about originally. I feel like it, in some ways, seeing the visualization of all of those characters that she was playing and kind of where she would fit into the other timelines as well. Playing a black female character, which is a role that is usually made just like a side character or some joke character or something like that, showing all of these different kind of personalities that she could be forced into, but she is kind of pushing forward and becoming the lead, becoming the hero of the story that will be able to move forward in the MCU, and I think that's really great too.
So I would give WandaVision an 8 out of 10, and in terms of MCU rankings, it does make it into the top 10, below the 2 Guardians movies and above Thor Ragnarok and Winter Soldier.
Super Mario 3D World!
So the other thing I'm going to be talking about, yes, there is more, is Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. In terms of the main game, I played it for somewhere between 16 and 17 hours, probably like 3 additional hours in multiplayer, and then for Bowser's Fury, I played that for about 5 hours. I originally played through most of 3D World a couple years back, exclusively multiplayer because my friend owned it. I'd never had a Wii U. And then this time I played it pretty much solo, despite, like I said, a couple hours of multiplayer. And I would say I prefer solo overall. It was definitely a much more fulfilling gaming experience to actually just go through it all on my own time.
Playing solo is also a lot better because sometimes the perspective of this version of 3D Mario can be really confusing and you just totally lose where you're going or what's in front of you and behind you. So that can get really annoying sometimes. So that's another reason why I preferred playing solo. Okay, this is the last cutaway to my phone.
That said, the multiplayer is still really fun. It doesn't feel too much like a total mess like some other modern Mario multiplayer stuff does. And the actual connection and dropping in and out of games for 3D World on Switch is actually really solid. It sucks that you don't get to carry over save experience, but I'm kind of used to that on playing on other people's profiles when I don't own the game, so it didn't bother me that much. There's some really great power-ups here, like the double cherry is just a super fun idea that they have a lot of really fun mechanics built off of, and the cat power-up, kind of the main thing in the game, is also really enjoyable. I played through every level as Peach, and so with the Peach float and the cat dash and climbing and stuff, there's a ton of fun movement options. Overall level design is good, with some trickier stamps and stars that aren't too obscure and ridiculously out there, except for like a couple of them. But there's nothing insanely memorable to me, unlike something like Mario Odyssey or even the little bit of Mario 64 that I played through not too long ago. Like, especially Odyssey, those worlds are just such vivid memories in my head versus like, it's all just kind of generically good in 3D World. The Captain Toad stuff was always a really welcome break and a nice change of pace. But the game kind of dropped off for me during the post game. It feels a little bloated and repetitive, and I was just trying to get the game done by the end of it. I didn't like the amount of remixes and recycling going on towards the end, and everything just kind of felt like it turned into either a key hunt or like a time trial. It just wasn't as fun as the first half of the game. On that subject, I really don't like that the most difficult later levels of the game basically give you no power-ups. It doesn't really make it harder, it just makes it less fun. Like, it just feels like you have less options, especially at the very end. To fully perfect this game, it wants you to replay every level as every character. There is no goddamn way I am playing through the last Mystery House and Champions Road with every character. Absolutely not. Some specific good things were Mount Must Dash. In general, worlds 1 through 4 are really solid, and the castle world is pretty good. And I liked anything with the jumping, switching platforms or the timed blocks. Anything built around those was good. Meanwhile, I never really liked the boot houses. Worlds 5 and 6 were a little weak, and then the whole post game, but mostly worlds Mushroom and Flower, are just very recycled and kind of boring and padded out. So on its own, 3D World is probably like a weak 7 for me, but it does also include Bowser's Fury, and Bowser's Fury is awesome. For me, it combines some of the best parts of Odyssey and 3D World, and it introduces something that I think could be huge for the future of Mario, which is that huge connected seamless world with tiny little sections that each have their own personality and challenges. The way that they get multiple uses out of those little sections and the little challenges and stuff in between, it was so engaging and enjoyable. Bowser's Fury is also extremely user-friendly, with my favorite thing in the world being the item inventory that you can keep. It was still challenging trying to make sure I had enough items for any occasion, but I love that, unlike 3D World where you can only have 2 and you have to juggle between them in this really awkward way, and you don't always get the one that you want or need, in Bowser's Fury it feels like a huge fix for me because you just have whatever you want when you need it, and it only makes the game more fun and lets you tackle things in different ways. It's also very user-friendly in traversing between the different worlds, not only being fun from a gameplay angle, but being pretty seamless with a couple frame rate issues here and there, mostly related to Fury Bowser showing up. And then like the post-game map that straight up just shows you where all the objectives are, that is a gift. Everything should do that. Bowser Jr. is a pretty good assist character. I had him set to a little help, and for the most part, it didn't really feel like I needed him. He was helpful a couple times. I like that he points out invisible hidden stuff. But he did screw me up a couple times, either killing something that I needed or taking something. I also wasn't crazy about the post game here, not as much as with 3D World, because there's still tons of fun stuff going on, but I don't like that in the post game the boss fight just is the same, and like if you engage him with the Mega Cat Bell at all, then that is just the final fight again. I wish you could fight him normally and beat him back down like you could during the first part of the game. And I don't like that the final fight is exactly the same both times, because I'm not crazy about the whole Plessy finale as it is. It feels just kind of extended and not super fun. But despite that, I did overall really like the Bowser element of this game. You really get the scale of him, especially when you get big too and the world is just so tiny, and the huge change in the environment and the music and all. It was really well done. The timing of those switches with Bowser and the placement of Plessy felt perfect every time. They both keep the game going in such a great way. You're either hopping off somewhere and Plessy's right there to get you to the next placement, or you're right near something that needs Bowser to blow it up, and boom, here he comes. The game just keeps going, and it's super fun, and it's smart and challenging, but still very fair. My only other complaint is that riding Plessy was a little bit awkward for me to both navigate him and jump and dive and also move the camera. I think I just would have liked gyro with him. My favorite sections were Scamper's Shores, Trick Rickety Tower and Mount Magmeow. While my least favorites were Fort Flattrap and Clawswipe Coliseum, anything that was kind of just a small contained area that was mostly about fighting, I wasn't super crazy about. Bowser's Fury really elevates this game package on the whole. I don't know if it's enough to buy 3D World if you don't really care about 3D World, because, you know, it is still that $60 price point, but I really love Bowser's Fury, and I think it only helps 3D World, which is a good game as is, so it raises the whole thing up to an 8 out of 10 for me. So yes, on to the side notes. The main thing that might be the focus of next month's episode is the Snyder Cut. I plan to watch that when it comes out. It hasn't come out yet as of recording. The original Justice League is a total piece of garbage, and I don't understand why so much hype has been put into the Snyder Cut, because he doesn't make good movies. Like, he's made 1.5 good movies. None of them have been with DC. So I do plan on watching it and getting annoyed all over again. Other than that, like I stated earlier, there's Falcon and the Winter Soldier coming out. Again, as of recording, those episodes haven't come out. I'm excited to watch it. I'll watch any Marvel stuff, but like, it is a lot less interesting to me than WandaVision, purely in terms of the setup of it. And lastly, I finally have gotten my hands on a PS5, so I would love to start diving into that. I don't really have any games for it right now. I played through Astro's Playroom, so I might bring that up next episode. There's all the free games on PlayStation Plus. I'd really like to get into Spider-Man, so if you have any recommendations on where to start with that, I would love to hear it in the comments. Alright, so that does it for this episode. Thank you for watching. If you have any thoughts on WandaVision or 3D World and Bowser's Fury, please let me know. Be sure to like this video. We have Ready Moves That Go episode 10 coming out shortly, along with some music stuff I'm working on that I'm really excited about, so also make sure you subscribe to keep tabs on all of that. So once again, thank you for watching, and see you next time.